To many, however, Lazar's motivations are as clear as the Nevada night sky. Since his story was publicized, scores of UFO investigators, believers in extraterrestrials, and even curious tourists have trekked to the area just outside the borders of the secret base. They gather at the Black Mailbox, which belongs to a local rancher. It's the only landmark for miles. It is at this site that Chuck Clark claims to have periodically witnessed unidentified flying objects.
Glowing craft that take off from actually south of the base out there itself in the next valley over. And they seem to be capable of doing, going from a dead stop to several thousand miles an hour, stop on a dime, do a 90 or 120-degree turn without decelerating, things that just don't fall into our physics.
Says he first witnessed what he terms UFO technology over the base one evening in February of 1995. This video, shot with a Sony Nightscope telephoto lens in late spring 1995, shows what appears to be a large glowing object just above the Groom Range. The light appears to change in intensity, and there are no normal aircraft strobes. The light hovers above the Groom Range for about 30 seconds, then disappears behind the mountain.
For a while, what I thought was a illumination flare. It had risen from the airspace and hung motionless in the sky, quite brilliant yellow-white light about the size of the planet Jupiter or Venus or something like that, and then slowly descended, and when it got down to the hill line, instead of disappearing behind the hills as I expected, it was in front of the hills. It got down to 20 or 30 feet above the ground where it stopped. And because it was quite bright, it was illuminating the ground. I could see clearly where it was. And I was still of the opinion it was a flare. I just thought it was blowing out from the base and that they were going to start a range fire with it. And then suddenly the thing streaked sideways, covered 4.8 miles distance in, 1 to 1.5 seconds. I didn't clock it. It's only an estimate. But on the outside, 1.5 seconds. And that's still in excess of 9,000 miles an hour. When it stopped, it didn't slow down and stop. It just stopped cold. And it hovered for a few more seconds, then it vanished in place.
This home video was made by a visitor to the Black Mailbox, who tries to keep in focus a bright light darting across a region just south of Area 51, the approximate location of S4, where Robert Lazar contends that 9 alien spacecraft were based.
What in the world is it? Here at the Black Mailbox. Got people from Japan just up the road here. We're at Groom Lake. Also recording the air channels. I can hear jets in the background. I'm going to zoom back a little bit. This is looking straight over Steve Medlin's ranch, right here off 375 highway. This is right over the peaks. I'm panning way back for reference, casino reference. I'm going to zoom back in. Moves away, comes forward. I'll turn on headlights now. Turn the headlights back off. Headlights back on. Looking for reference. Got the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit sign going back up above the mountain. Boy, this is hard to nail. Trying to zoom in. I'm maxed out on zoom. Camera's perfectly still, and this thing is all over the place.
The object seen in this home video is very similar to what Chuck Clark says he has seen on several occasions at this site. Again, he was too far to notice any detail in the object, but could clearly witness its lightning speed movements.
It was about 13.5 miles distant from my position, and then when it did come down in front of that hill and I could see precisely where it was still 12 miles from me. And so I got the impression that this was about the size of a fuselage of an aircraft. I think it was big enough to be, piloted, 30, 40 foot across, something like that. But I was too far to see any any structure or any shape. And it's also self-luminous, and sometimes also, that's another thing that shows up. Apparently the luminosity is some sort of a byproduct of the propulsion system, because quite often just before a maneuver is made, the brightness will change. It'll either intensify or dim a little. It sort of cues you that something's going to happen.
This video, taken by a professional photographer, shows a bright light in the distance above the base. The object enters the camera's view in the lower right side of the frame. It's moving so fast that it's difficult to see. The object makes radical movements at extremely high speeds. On several occasions, the object leaves the screen, then reappears, then vanishes. It blinks out, then reappears. Also notice the light's intensity increases just prior to acceleration. We showed this tape to propulsion expert Mary Bowden for her analysis.
The things that seem very unusual about this that we've just seen are the velocity that it appears to have, and the fact that it seems to be doing these turns and maneuvers that are not very aerodynamic. And a vehicle with wings does fairly slow, controlled turns, I mean, relative to what we saw here. If you want to start with the assumptions that this vehicle is 13 or more miles away, and that it is doing this maneuver in essentially the way you see it, which is really a two-dimensional image that we're looking at, it is clearly traveling at a very fast rate of speed. And it is doing a maneuver that is not at all conventional for any sort of spacecraft or more likely aircraft that I know of. In addition, something that's traveling that fast would normally it's traveling, if you calculate the velocity, it's faster than the speed of sound, and therefore you would expect to hear some sort of a sonic boom, especially if you're only 13 miles away from this thing. You would, very likely hear it. So it's a little confusing how you would get something traveling that fast and doing maneuvers like that without creating a sound, a sonic boom of some sort. None of these things can be willing to believe there are simpler explanations than to think that it's some sort of a alien spacecraft.
Although most of the mysterious sightings are from a distance of a dozen miles or more, there are a few who say they have seen objects in the area at a much closer range.